The lone voice of sanity on the Fox propaganda network destroyed her smug conservative co-hosts with facts and logic about just how much red states economically depend on blue states. Intrigued? Then click that like, subscribe, and the alert bell, and enjoy the video. So as most of you are aware, there's little in terms of political substance which comes from the Fox propaganda network. It is not a news network. It is a very successful, a wildly successful, turnkey and sophisticated propaganda arm of the Republican Party, which is nothing new. But there is one crusader, one person who is fighting the good fight on the Fox propaganda network, daring to try to push back on the verifiably, consistently false talking points of the Republican Party and the American conservative movement. And the person, the brave crusader in question, is Jessica Tarlov. Tarlov is somebody that we've talked about before on the channel. She is, again, the lone liberal / progressive voice on The Five, which is, it should be called, again, 4-1 or outnumbered 4-1, because it's basically Tarlov or one of her surrogates when she's not on air, which is very rarely, up against 4 right-wingers on the Fox propaganda network, including Jeanine Pirro, Dana Perino, Jesse Waters, Greg Gutfeld, pretty consistently. And despite the fact that she's outnumbered 4-1, which is an incredibly difficult position, even if you have the facts on your side, if you're in the middle of a live debate in hostile terrain, which the Fox propaganda network is, and Fox viewers are, even if you have the facts on your side, which she does overwhelmingly, it's really difficult because you're up against 4 rhetorically skilled opponents who, tag team you in terms of they'll take a cheap shot or they'll try to interrupt to, throw off your train of thought. And then when you correct yourself, another one will step in. It's basically like, imagine a physical altercation where you're up against 4 people. It's not like it is in movies. If you're outnumbered in a fight 4-1, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, you're probably going to lose the fight. But Jessica Tarlov does an amazing job night after night after night on The Five. And when she basically takes the gloves off and gets as ruthless as her opponents often are, because Gutfeld and Waters and Pirro especially, not so much Dana Perino, they can be so smug, they can be so relentless, they can be so condescending. It's really nice to see Jessica Tarlov take the gloves off and start fighting back and being fiery. And in this clip, she does just that on the topic of red states and blue states in terms of their economic variance. So we're going to play the clip and then unpack it.
But I think it's wonderful that there are new boom towns and boom states, and I think that that should be celebrated. I also think that it would be great then if there are these southern Republican-controlled states that they start paying their fair share and take care of Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Kentucky, because I'm sick of taking care of them from up here in New York or in California, because blue states pay the highest taxes, and then those federal dollars get shipped down south to make sure that they have decent schools, they have health care, they have good roads, et cetera. So by all means, South Carolina, Nancy Mace, who wants to take credit for things she voted against, please give some money to Kentucky, help them out. Tommy Tuberville, talk about you all the time. You should be paying more and taking care of your own people instead of feeding off of Democrats that pay higher taxes.
So, well said, Jessica Tarlov. And she's absolutely right on the facts. They are what they are. Listen, as we talked about before, it's not to say that Democratic states are, perfect bastions of, economic prosperity. But relatively speaking, the data is clear and has been consistently clear for decades. Red states economically underperform compared to blue states. Blue states are more economically prosperous on average. And, Money Geek it reviewed so much of the financial data across this country, and their key findings, 7 of the 10 states most dependent on the federal government were Republican voting and Republican-led. It's simply true. That's an overwhelming statistic. Of the states that sent more taxes in, more than they received, 52% were Democratic voting and 48% were Republican voting. So it's relatively closer then. But in terms of the biggest and most, financially dependent on blue states in the federal government, 7 of the 10 states in question were Republican voting. That is a disturbing statistic, especially given how smug conservatives very often are and Republican officials are about the economic prosperity, gang, the economic utility of Republican policies, gang. Blah, blah, blah. And Republicans can be so smug when it comes to the economy, and they say it's one of the defining issues. And yet again, the data is clear. If you look at census data, if you look at data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, look at the states with the highest poverty level: Louisiana, Mississippi, New Mexico, West Virginia, Alabama, Kentucky, Arkansas, Oklahoma, South Carolina, which Jessica Tarlov mentioned here. Those are all red Republican states. The poorest states in this country are overwhelmingly Republican. The most federally dependent states in this country are overwhelmingly Republican. In terms of poverty, the one district, it's not even a state, which comes close, which is blue, is D.C. Okay, so one outlier. Otherwise, it's red, 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 red. Now, that is an indictment of Republican leadership and Republican fiscal policy. It is simply a fact, and I'm glad that Jessica Tarlov is being brutal about this, especially given how Gutfeld, Waters, and Pirro are so smug and condescending about the Republican platform and Democratic failures. The fact of the matter is, Democratic leadership, Democratic policies, and Democratic voters are correlated with economic prosperity in a way that Republicans simply can't compete. We have to reclaim the narrative when it comes to that, and good on Jessica Tarlov for wading into the lion's den to make that case and walking out with a new fur coat.